We now welcome former Israeli ambassador to the UK and international lawyer Daniel Taub, joining us from our I-24 News studios in Jerusalem. Ambassador, thank you so much for your time. So let's take a deeper look at South Africa's case, accusing Israel of genocide inside Gaza as Israel responds to the Hamas massacres and abductions inside the country on the 7th of October. What do you make of this claim? Your reaction?
Well, it's hard to imagine a more gross distortion of the crime of genocide than what we're seeing here. Hamas invades Israel, butchers, mutilates 1,200 people, would have wanted to go further. It captures, takes hostage 240, retreats into Gaza, hides behind civilians in the most sick way. And then, when Israel defends itself, it accuses it of genocide. Shocking. But in a way, this is a continuation of a strategy of Palestinian terrorist movements that we've seen over the past decades. It's a kind of pincer movement, where on the one hand, they create impossible dilemmas for democracies fighting terrorism on the one hand, and on the other hand, they try in international organizations to criminalize those efforts to defend oneself.
Talking about the sick strategy, earlier in the day, the Daily Mail sharing photographs of some of the young Israeli hostages in captivity for more than 3 months now, emaciated, unrecognizable. One wonders, Ambassador, where the outrage is on the international stage here. And when it comes to abduction of hostages, there is intent, and much of the focus with genocide conventions is around intent. The IDF is not intending to harm civilians, going to great lengths that are documented to protect civilian life. Many civilians are used as human shields as well. We know this inside Gaza. What is South Africa likely to base its argument on? What insights can you share from what is known about South Africa's argument in this case?
So I think you're absolutely right, Benita. I mean, this is a war that Israel did not want. As you know, for the 16 years that Hamas has been in control of Gaza, since it overtook it in a violent coup, Israel has done everything to avoid these conflicts. It's worked to develop technologies like Iron Dome to shoot missiles out of the sky with other missiles so that we wouldn't have the need to go into the heart of these areas. But we've seen that Hamas, sadly, is more intent on killing Jews than it is in helping its own population. And you're right also about the hostages. You know, South Africa submitted a document, it's 84 pages to the court, setting out its case. Not a single reference to the hostages, no references to the massacres, but of the hostages. And, you know, and that's extraordinary. Amongst the hostages are people with African citizenship, even South African citizenship. But this is not of concern to South Africa. South Africa is not concerned about Palestinian rights either. As we know, it has never raised its voice in relation to the murder of thousands of Palestinians in Syria, or the murder of Palestinian human rights activists by Hamas in Gaza. So there's something that's really cynical here. It's really an attempt to try and tie Israel's hands in defending itself against Hamas.
And amongst those hostages, also a baby, the elderly, and again, looking at those pictures of those young girls, heartbreaking beyond to think of what it must be like to spend 3 months in captivity, abducted by terrorists. Ambassador, moving on to some of the comments made by some right-wing politicians inside Israel and ministers as well, some making inflammatory calls about Gaza and what should happen there. How do you think this rhetoric during wartime might impact this case?
So the court has made it absolutely clear in previous cases that the wartime rhetoric can't be taken as evidence of intent, especially when as sort of the few quotes that they've been able to muster up, and it's really a very feeble collection, don't come from the chain of command. You know, they're really desperate. They're quoting from Israeli singers, Israeli TV celebrities to try and muster up some evidence of intent. It's so clearly not there. as you know, since Israel came into control of Gaza in 1967 in the Six-Day War, since then the Palestinian life expectancy in Gaza has gone up, infant mortality has gone down, the population has quadrupled or quintupled. If this was a genocide, it would be the least successful genocide in history. And as you know, even prior to after Israel pulled out of every inch of Gaza, it continued to ensure that medical supplies, water, electricity reached the population precisely to try and ensure their humanitarian welfare.
And if, Ambassador, the court does, in fact, issue a warrant against Israel, for example, to stop the fighting, what options does Israel have, given that it is a signatory to the court's Convention for the Prevention of Genocide? Your thoughts?
So the court can't issue a warrant, but it's an international institution, and its statements are significant. They do attract a lot of attention, and that is why it's so important for us that the court really does think long and hard. I think there are a couple of things that the court really needs to bear in mind. One of them is that if Hamas had not perpetrated these horrendous massacres on October the 7th, not a single Palestinian in the Gaza Strip would have died. And the other is that if Hamas were to comply with international law, if it were to release the hostages, if it were to surrender its arms, then the hostilities that we're seeing at the moment, they could finish tomorrow.
Certainly is lots to unpack, and we will be watching, of course, in the coming days. Your thoughts on retired Supreme Court President Aharon Barak? He'll be Israel's appointee to the judges panel at the International Court of Justice in The Hague. The 87-year-old Holocaust survivor is, of course, well respected internationally. At the same time, a harsh critic here at home of the government's judicial overhaul plans. Your thoughts on this move?
So, as you say, he's a very eminent judge. He's an international lawyer of international standing, which I think is important. The fact that he himself is a Holocaust survivor, a reminder of what the real crime of genocide and not this fabrication of this application actually is. But I think more than that, he is a reminder, as you say, of the fact that Israel does feel that law has a role to play, and our Supreme Court is extremely active in guiding and checking the operations and the tactics of our military in defending themselves. But international law, Benita, is not a suicide pact. It doesn't mean that you can't do anything. And our court grapples with how you defend yourself while respecting your obligations under international law. And I think to have a model of that kind of very difficult but very important balance before the court is going to be very helpful indeed.
South Africa presents its case at The Hague on Thursday, followed by Israel on Friday. We will be watching. Thank you so much for your insights for now. Ambassador Daniel Taub, former Israeli ambassador to the UK and international lawyer, speaking to us from Jerusalem. Thank you so much.
Thank you.